All right, so we are at quarter after, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So thanks everybody for coming. You are in the transferable skills panel where Seema just kind of teed us up perfectly at the end of that keynote. We're gonna talk about leaving the field and taking some of your skills with you, how to apply them wherever you end up. We're doing it today with a few folks who worked in museums for quite some time and moved on to greener pastures. And we're going to go through, we'll all introduce ourselves, and then we'll dive right into the questions. Some of the questions I came up with, some of them came from the Twitter world. If you have any questions throughout this, you can feel free to pop them in the chat. Let me make sure I have my chat window up. So you can throw them in the chat or you can pipe in at some point, whichever you want to do. So to get things started, first of all, my name's Pat Whitware. I am the Marketing Communications Chair for the Visitor Experience Group. My day job is running a small corporate history museum in Philadelphia, which is my way of avoiding telling people that I work for Wells Fargo. And I have not left the field yet, but as our museums are being shut down across the country, in the next 6 months, I probably will be soon. So I'm very excited to be talking to these folks who have already done it. And so what I'm gonna have them do now is I'll have all of them introduce themselves with a short summary of their museum career, an explanation of why they left the field and what they're doing now. So we'll start that off with Mikaela.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mikaela Maria. I have a master's in American and Public History. I graduated in like 2014 or 15 maybe. Wow. So I was in the field for about 5 or 6 years. My background in museums is primarily tour guide, a little bit of education, and programs and events. And did you ask for also why we left?
Yes.
Money, essentially. To boil it down to one word, and I'm sure we can get into that a little more, but I needed to be able to take care of myself, so that's what I had to do. But I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Tarra.
Hi, I'm Tarra Raspanti. I'm currently working at Manor College, but before that, my museum career basically started at the University of the Arts. I got my master's in museum education in 2017, and then being in that program until about 2019, I interned at several museums. I've worked with both Patrick and Mikaela before. So bouncing between a lot of different positions in museums down in Center City, Philadelphia. And the reason that I left is very similar to Mikaela's. I needed to find full-time work. I think actually all of my museum positions were part-time or internships. And balancing several part-time jobs is just not ideal for, longer than 2 years. I was pretty exhausted and tired, so I needed to kind of just find something that would give me more stability. So I jumped out to find some full-time work. And as I said, now I'm at Manor College working in student affairs.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, Tiffany.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tiffany Allen. I know the VEX crew because I used to be on the committee. I was in museums for about 10 years. I have my master's of museum education, like Tarra, from the University of the Arts also. I was in the last class that only had to do 1 year, so. I worked at I was in Philadelphia for about 10 years at a science museum and an art museum. And the reason I left was because of, everybody say it with me, money. So yeah, that's the reason I left the field. And right now I work for the Girl Scouts Heart of New Jersey Council in New Jersey. And I'm the STEM experience manager there. And that's what I do right now.
Oh, thanks, Tiff. All right, Joseph, you're up.
All right, mine's going to be a little long. I started working at the Contemporary Art Museum in Houston in the education department as a paid intern while I was a junior in college in 1991. I worked at the Whitty Museum, the San Antonio Museum of Art, the San Antonio Children's Museum, and various education, public programs, and exhibition development roles. I moved to Philly in '96 to pursue my doctorate and worked at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, Tarra Puertorriqueño, East Africa Resource and Study Center, Evergreen Exhibitions, Mural Arts, and Philadelphia Museum of Art in various educational public program, exhibition development, and curatorial roles while in grad school. After completing my dissertation, Complicated Business, Chicanos, Museums, and Corporate Sponsorship, I worked at the Fleischer Art Memorial, Moore College, University of the Arts, and finally the Delaware Contemporary, as a manager of research and community engagement, professor and program director, and executive director, respectively. The two main reasons I left the field were to provide better financial security for my growing family and really to leave untenable work environment. I'm now a business development associate for the East Coast for Physician Life Care Planning, a group that does economic damages valuation services, and our main clients are trial attorneys.
All right. Well, thanks to all of you for being here. As y'all may have noticed, this is a pretty Philly-centric group, although some of us have bounced around here and there outside of the city. But it's an interesting city to be in the museum field with obviously so many historic sites and its fair share of other types of museums as well. Nevertheless, there are still plenty of us leaving the field. So we're gonna dive right in, and this whole session is kind of based around transferable skills. So the first question I'm gonna ask everybody, how did you adapt skills you developed as a museum worker that have translated into your current role?
Well, let me share.
Any one of you is welcome to jump in there.
I'll go, if that's all right. I should have said too, right now I'm an administrator at Rutgers Camden University. That's my current role. So I jumped all the way across the river from Philadelphia. But so I find that the visitor services aspect of museum work has been so important in translating to talking to students, dealing with students, kind of just going that extra mile for them is something that I thought was just normal because I was surrounded by all these wonderful museum professionals for so long. And getting into higher ed, I realized it's not everybody's go-to move. So I find I've been able to connect with the students, get them the resources that they need. And then also the events and program planning, I was able to turn that into essentially me and one other colleague handle our entire school's commencement celebrations now and various other orientations and things like that throughout the year. And all of that public speaking kind of, multitasking has all translated really, really well into working in higher ed.
Yeah, I'll kind of follow up with that because I'm also in higher ed. So I feel like, a lot of the positions that I've had focus around customer service, front facing, very visitor centric, on the floor, interacting with guests. And it kind of matches what I'm doing in student affairs, which is interacting with students, constantly, even with us kind of half virtual right now. So finding those kind of skills that I've already developed in museums, in museum education, and just taking them and finding a way to make it work, I think kind of felt naturally. Like at first, I remember when I started looking at jobs, I was talking to Mikaela about it, and she's the one who actually helped me to think of skills outside of like this bubble of museums, because I think I kind of got stuck and I was afraid to leave. And I thought that I only had these type of skills and this is all it translated into was being, a guest services associate or doing whatever I was doing. Whereas once I started to think of it, I'm organized and I can multitask and I can talk to people really well and plan events. Then I started to venture out and look at where I could put those skills. So I think thinking about the bigger picture of all those skills helped me to see that, there's so many different fields you can go into, such as higher ed.
I'll chime in next. So the skills that I really looked at when I was looking outside of the field, I looked at the content knowledge I had. So I worked in a science museum for about 8 years or so. And so that was something I felt was a skill that was transferable to wherever I went. I also thought a lot about what I was doing when it came to training. So I used to train teachers on how to teach science to young children. And so that training aspect is something that I looked for when I was looking for new jobs. Um, Also the program development side of things. So I knew that I had the skills to, like they were saying, like to plan events and to create curriculum and things like that. And in a nonprofit setting, even though I didn't have the quote unquote teaching degree, I still had those skills that an educator would need to apply. So I also kind of put that into my search when I was looking. And then something else that I kind of, the early childhood part of my museum career was sort of like a niche that I found, and it came from like a 1-year stint that I had working at the Goddard School. And it's kind of cool the way it worked and became my life in the museum world. But the early childhood knowledge that I had is something that I also looked into, that developmental side of thing, and then also understanding the systems that were behind early childhood education. That's something that not a lot of people know other than teachers, but there are organizations outside of museums that are still using and working with early with young children and with early learning institutions and centers. So that content knowledge was really important also. And then a part of that was grant management. So I worked under a lot of grants, and I also helped to write some grants and things like that. And so that's another skill that I was like, oh, I know how to do that. I understand that world. Let me look around and see if there is another organization that needs something like that. So I looked at just the basic skills that I had and kind of took the museum side of things out of it, like just brought it down to its bare bones. Like, what are you doing? You are writing curriculum, you are teaching, you are training. And there are plenty of institutions, organizations, and corporations out there that need that kind of stuff. They need people with that knowledge. So that's what I did. I just broke down the skills, took them to their bare bones. Forget about this like art history, forget about this. Like, what are you doing? Like, when it gets down to the nitty gritty. So that's how I started looking outside of the museum field.
Yeah. This is a good reflective exercise, Pat, and I'm hearing that from all four of us. So I'm in sales. It's kind of a niche area, but I can't come in and just expect to sell our services and what we do and just be successful at it, right? So I've got to go through the understanding of our services, build a deep understanding of our services, our experts, and our process to be able to efficiently and effectively tell our story and how we can help our clients. I've got to be a good listener and responsive to what their needs are and what their pains are. I've got to be able to build trust and relationships with those folks because I'm going to see them again, right? And I hope to see them again, right? Because I want to build that business. And I've got to find meaning in and care about what I'm doing. And as I thought about this, it's like this is all stuff that I had to do over my tenure in our field or my former field, the museum field. So that's kind of a process way to look at it, similar to what you all have been talking about.
Yeah, there's a lot of good points there. And I think one of the things, like Tiffany's saying, to break down your skills. And I will say, I've tried to do that. And I think what Mikaela and Tarra did is they worked together to do that. And I think that's what really helps. If that's not something you can figure out on your own, to have somebody who's very familiar with your work tell you what you're good at is really an asset in this particular exercise, I would say. Would you all agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's something I'm probably going to be doing too shortly. So sticking with skills for a minute, let's say that you are in a position to hire somebody who is going to help you do your job. Which museum skills on their resume would stand out to you for the type of work that you're doing now?
I think for me, I would definitely lean towards looking at skills such as like customer service, front facing, like organization, anything that like almost anyone could really have, but seeing that experience, and even if it's something that was like short term, whether that be a couple months or a year or something like that, because I've, you know, I'm sure we've all experienced it when you're looking for a job and it's asking for like 5 to 10 years of experience. And it's like, I've only been in the field for 3 years. Like, what am I going to do? Right. So like, just, I think if I was looking, I would focus more on the skills and less on the amount of time somebody's been within that position, and focusing more on like who they are, what they bring to the table, really looking at their skill set, and not so much on like, do they fit that perfect mold, or are they, you know, have they been in the field for 10, 15 years? So that, I think those are things that I would definitely look at. And thinking about with like customer service skills and front facing positions, I think those are valuable for any position, because whether I'm talking to a student, a board member, a donor, the president, like all of these different people and positions, I feel like you have to kind of work your skills and find ways to work with these different audiences that's going to make them want to be a part of the museum or the culture institution or college or wherever you're at. So those are what I would lean towards.
I wrote a few things down. So what we do at the Girl Scouts Heart of New Jersey Council is I would look for some program planning. So if you're good at organizing programs, just coordinating people, coordinating speakers, that kind of thing, that's something that we do at our council in the STEM world, and all the other pillars that are a part of Girl Scouts also. The STEM knowledge would be important. So that content knowledge, whatever it may be, whether it be science, whether it be art, whether it be history, I would look to see if you have that background and you understand that. The skills that you would need to just stay organized, scheduling and that kind of thing, keeping things in order, knowing all the different software out there that we would use, and then also what audiences you've worked with. So if you've worked with parents before, if you've worked with K through 12, if you've worked with early pre-K, or we don't do much with little toddlers and things like that, but knowing if you have the skills that in the background to work with those audiences, that's something that I would look for too, because I definitely want you to understand who we were speaking to when it comes to the programming here. I always say, like, you can't teach someone to be a good teacher, but you can teach them the ways of your organization. So all that Girl Scout stuff, that's all that big stuff, I can show you that, but I can't teach you how to be how to communicate well with parents, or I can't teach you how to get a kid to understand what, you know, robotics are. But some people are just gifted in that they're able to just, you know, translate that into a way that a kid would understand. So knowing that you have the capabilities to do something like that in the world that I'm in right now, that would be something that I would look for on resumes.
I've got a few here. Obviously, there's technical skills. One thing is, you know, understanding, utilize a CRM or customer relationship management system like Salesforce. That's what we use. And I've had to learn that, actually.
Us too, Joseph. We use
Yeah.
Salesforce. So like, look at that. He's like in the health field, and I'm all the way over here like scouting around.
Yeah. So and I think what's helped is being aware of what CRMs are capable of doing, but I've never been the person to do them. And now I've got to do that, like the entry and the management and setting up tasks and so forth. So you know, those kinds of skills are definitely transferable for all of you. And understanding how to use them strategically, you know, how to build relationships and communication strategies and so forth. So now definitely technical skills like that. And it doesn't just have to be Salesforce, right? I think if you know how to use them, and that's when being a lifelong learner is very helpful, right? You know, here I am 50 and I'm learning how to use Salesforce, and I think being open to learning and that's so important. I think beyond just sales experience, just, you know, demonstrated experience in successfully building and nurturing relationships with peers, partners, and external entities expertise, a lot of you folks in education or in other areas of the museum field, you got that, right? That's a big part of your role, whether it's with, with schools or community groups, or, you can work with a mammoth institution and you do that internally. Those are important skills. Demonstrated experience in successfully outwardly representing an organization or cause, whether you're nonprofit or for-profit, that's so indispensable. And then finally, if I see that you've got initiative or something I call oomph, those are, again, sort of some of the intangibles, but that shows me that you've got that and that you can lead from within. And what I mean by that is, you can help make the team better, help make your peers better. You don't have to be that leader that we think of in the traditional sense. I'm the department head or whatever, but you can be a leader on the team. And so those are some skills that I was looking.
I agree with what everyone said so far, and with what Tarra said about the visitor services aspect to the higher ed and interacting with everyone from the dean to the students, chancellor, the operations management. And I would say that for what I do, definitely looking at people who have programs experience, operations experience, people who are logically minded. And like I said earlier, that whole museum thing of like, you wear many hats, especially if you're a small institution, and you know how to go from one thing to the next and put out fires, and you know who to talk to do this, who to talk to do that. That's not a skill everyone has. So I would say don't sell yourself short. You think, oh, I just help with events, or I just do this or just do that. What I've learned leaving the field again is that not everyone is able to do that, and not everyone is able to do that with a smile and a good attitude, and that'll take you so much farther than you might realize right now. Great
point, Mikaela.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that's another thing that comes up, I mean, in any profession, but I think it's permeable in the museum field as well, that when folks get mired down in their imposter syndrome, they forget that they have these skills then that not everyone else has. Just because you do it every day and you're familiar with it doesn't lessen its value to somebody else, which is an important thing to remember. And just kind of from everybody, I mean, there's things about specific skills in there. And I think talking about the CRM, the customer relationship management tools, I think that brings up an interesting point that if you're somebody like Joseph, who despite working in museums, never really interacted with that. I'm the same way. I've been in museums for 18 years, and the most I've done that is I worked one summer at the Betsy Ross House selling tickets, and I can't even tell you what that tool was. But to be able to learn a tool like that, and even to just go over to the person in your institution who is in charge of that and just ask for some information about it, how it works, is, I think, a valuable thing, because clearly that's being used in other fields. But even if it's not that, just having the ability to strategically use programs for things beyond what they're expected to be used for is a marketable skill in any source that Joseph brought up. But the overall arching thing that I got from that is that more than anything else, there's a lot of potential to hire for personality, which people who work in the front lines of museums and programs and visitor experience, whatever the case may be, we have personality in droves. So I think that is a really big factor in our favor, because like some of the skills that you think everyone has but don't, personality and the ability to have friendly interactions and engaging interactions with people is definitely not a skill that everyone has outside of this group of people here. Like, I mean, this is the visitor experience conference. We have that skill, but out in other professions, out in other parts of the museum, not everybody has that skill, as I'm sure you've all encountered. So kind of moving away from skills for a moment, what are some of the main differences between museum work and your current role?
I'll start on this one. Being financially rewarded for exercising, initiative and excelling in your work, and having a structure in your workplace that rewards that and a pathway to improve that by, you know, the incentives that you have. That's very different. I mean, we you know, spending so much time in the museum field, we get other kinds of rewards, right, in droves. But you know, those things don't help you in other ways, like with your student loans or with your child's daycare, or those other things that are you know, become, you know, more important than you know, being, you know, there or doing that job because it's your passion. You have more passion, so that's clearly different. And I thought, you know, uh, my job does involve some travel, which I mostly like. You know, something I enjoyed about, you know, going to museum conferences and things. But for the most part, you know, being able to clock in and clock out, and not going to bed with the worries of the job, or waking up and confronting the worries. You know, so that's been, you know, that's been a very welcome change there.
Yeah, I agree. I find that there's a lot of differences, some like negative ones that are, you know, it's farther away from the public what I do. Higher ed is still, you know, a huge diverse group of students and people to work with, but it has more hoops to jump through. And it's less creative, but the missions are sort of the same. It's still nonprofit work. But the positive differences so outweigh that at this point in my life. I agree with Joseph that when I'm done with work, I'm done. I turn off my computer and I don't have to answer emails. I don't have to work on the weekends. I don't have to work events so that I can make a little extra money. You know, it's the work-life balance is a huge payoff. And specifically, one of the differences for my job, I have to say, is that I entered a position that's part of a union. So I don't have to fight alone for the things that, you know, we all kind of deserve from our employers. My raises are already negotiated. My vacation days have been negotiated. If management wants to change things all around, like a lot of places, all kinds of institutions are doing right now, there's a whole group of people to kind of fight for what we need together. So I know not everyone, you know, gets into that position, but that's been one of the biggest differences in transitioning into this different field. And the benefits, you know, are just totally worth it right now.
I think, I mean, some of them, obviously, we've all kind of touched on it, is that, you know, money and having a little more stability. I don't have to bounce between 2 part-time jobs every day of the week, which is just great. And I don't feel as angry as I used to, just because I kind of already, you know, said it a lot, that I'm coming from front-facing, on the floor positions where, you know, I often felt I was fighting to be heard, fighting to, you know, get the voice of the people who are telling us what they're seeing or feeling heard to the leadership levels. I feel like it's a little easier for me to do that outside the museum field, just because I also work at a smaller school. So it's less people that I'm going to, if I'm at like a bigger museum, even though I've also been at small museums, it's still less, I think, hoops to jump through. I do struggle with work-life balance, I think, more now, just because that's just my personality. It has nothing to do, I think, with my position. It's more of just me thinking that I need to like do more and do more, do more. But I'm working on that, just so everyone knows. And then just, yeah, the stability and being able to shut off and not having to think about having to get extra work or do extra jobs or look for a third part-time job. It's nice to be able to breathe when you're done work.
So I'll go. The biggest differences I see are being a part of this much larger thing. So there are 112 councils throughout the United States, and we all answer to our headquarters, which is in New York, which is GSUSA. However, GSUSA will put out content, but we each kind of have our own licenses. And in the museum world, I dealt with what was at my institution, but there's so much more now. So it's all like, pew, 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 like you could do it this way, or you could do it this way, or you could do it this way, or you could do it this way too. And I'm like, I'm a Libra, so knowing that there's all these options is not helpful at all. So I miss kind of like things being confined and there being a way instead of like a million different ways that things could be done. So that's one difference that I kind of noticed. Also, I do a little bit of everything now. I know people in the museum say they do a little bit of everything now, but I feel like I do much more than I probably thought I would have been doing. I thought I would have been doing more educating, but I'm in development also, and it's a lot. Like you're checking people in, you're in the shop helping people purchase things, you're passing out cookies. Like there's much more than I feel like my workload is much more now. A perk is the pay is better. Like many of us have said, you do feel that you are getting paid for what you do. Like you see the workload go up, and you see that you are getting compensated for that. Also, let me see. My work-life balance too, Tara, is kind of and COVID being in the house all the time hasn't helped at all either. It's hard to step away from the computer sometimes. So that's one thing that I feel is a big difference between working what I did at the museum, I should say, and now working for this organization. Yeah, so those are the few things that I found are big differences that leaving the field.
Can I add something
Sure.
in response to Tiff? So I had the sort of the opposite as Tiff is like, as the former executive director, program director, your work is like this. And in my new role, I have a pretty well-defined lane. So that's another shift for me. I know it can go in either direction, but that's been an adjustment. And again, I think for me, it's been helpful for many reasons.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Going from being an executive director at Elfers Alley and then running visitor services at Please Touch, which is the Children's Museum in Philadelphia, to working for Wells Fargo's corporate museum, I was taking a lot of those habits I had developed in the nonprofit world and applying them to the for-profit world, to the corporate world. And that did not last. And I now am, even though I'm still technically working in a museum, I am working in a museum from 9 to 5, and it doesn't exist in my head outside of that, which I think is like about half of where we were. But in the case of Tarra and Tiffany, not just like the job you have, but the habits that you developed in the museum world have definitely come over. But I will say, knowing all 4 of these panelists, everyone looks more relaxed and happier, just from an outsider perspective. That it is significant. Yeah. So there's that. Take that for what you will. All right, so we still have a few minutes left. I know we have a couple of questions in the chat and another one here. So I'll ask, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you left the museum field?
I'll say, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, you, Tarra, you go.
Okay. I think a big thing was, we talked about it, I think, before starting the session, is knowing that it's okay to leave. I was extremely nervous to leave. I was scared that if I wanted to come back, would I be welcomed back by the community, especially in Philadelphia? Like, what was it going to be like? Would people, think that I ruined my career? Like all of these things that I was just assuming. I wish I knew then that it is okay to leave, and that I'm kind of giving myself more time to gain more skills, so that if I want to come back and when I'm ready to come back, I can jump into something and know kind of already what makes me happy, what is going to help me to grow in my career. And if I go back to museum education, kind of looking at, the skills I've developed and how I can bring more to the table. So knowing that it's okay to leave. Go ahead, Joseph.
Yeah, that first of all, that's a great point, Tara. And when I was an executive director, I was thinking just that, because there can be a lot of insularity in our field if all you've done from college and education is be in the museum field. So I would see that as a plus. People that have gone out and learn other skill sets and had to respond to other kinds businesses and circumstances and organizations. So if you're still looking in that direction, I think that's great. And I think you're only benefiting your marketability from, at least for people that have enough vision to understand that. Similar to what's been said, otherwise, the work-life equilibrium doesn't have to be so hard. To me, that's a good thing that to know earlier on. And that, for me, and again, I'm speaking for myself, that being a museum director is kind of meh, you know. uh, that was a goal of mine for a very long time. And the reason I bring that up is because, it was where I wanted to end up, in the field, and it was my trajectory. And maybe, if I had known, that maybe that's not where I want to be sooner, I might have made some other decisions. But yeah, those are two things.
I'll go. So I would say that that stability was something that I found that was like something like, oh, you can have stability. Like, it's not always your CEO changing over like 12,000 times or, like not knowing if this is going to be renewed or that's going to be renewed. Like, I feel much more stable. That's another reason I left. There are actually three. So money was one. The other was I wanted to be closer to my family, and museums are not everywhere. They really aren't. Like, like if there is a local museum, it's probably like the same three old people that have been there for a really long time at that cultural center. And you getting your foot in is tough sometimes, but I wanted to go back closer to my family. And then the other one was the stability. It always felt like something was like, not, you just never ever knew. But I feel more stable here. And then also, like, you being happy and enjoying your job is possible. You not minding, a little something, like a little bump in the road, and not shaking you to the point that you are being angry all the time. That is possible. You can find a job like that. And so that's something that I wish I also, that I now see now that I'm outside of the museum field. And I'm not going to say it's every museum. I'm sure there's a place I would find that I was happy. But I had to leave, go outside of it for right now. I think it's interesting what you guys were saying about going back into the field. It might just be my personality, but I would walk in there with feathers on, smiling like, I'm back.
I think I would now.
Okay.
Now I'm like more confident. Like, yes, Tara, you have the skills. Like, you're ready. I think I would now, but back then I think I was a little more afraid.
Okay.
Stuck in that little bubble of like, this is all I can do, and I don't know what to do if I leave. But now I think I'd wear the feathers. I think I'm ready.
All right, that's right. Go put your crown on and you parade up in there like, I am back. And I'm about to rock this field. Yeah, I mean, and don't be afraid. Like, if you do leave, it's fine. And if you want to go back, it's fine. Like, life is fluid. I read somewhere that, like, our millennials will have many, many careers. We'll bounce around a little bit. We want to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And that's fine. I don't see a problem with it unless huh?
We are like that, aren't we?
Yes, we are. Us millennials.
Yes. I want to add something really quickly, and this is a story. Our company, before COVID, we looked to fill positions, and the candidate pool, frankly, was not very good. Because the economy and people had jobs, and then in the middle of COVID, we had about 8+ positions to fill, and the candidate pool was amazing. People, like people with masters, people that had unfortunately, lost their jobs as a result. And the only reason I bring that up is because, this is a highly educated and skilled group. So, I'm imagining that there are still really good opportunities out there, and that you will stand out, for many of them.
So we have questions in the chat. Mark and Lori are both kind of asking similar questions about the time frame between and finding the job. So deciding to leave and finding a job in another field, and any difficulty you may have encountered getting people to look past the job titles to the skills. So we have about 2.5 minutes left. You just want to give a quick answer about how long roughly between the decision to leave and leaving did it take, and did you find it was tough to get people to see the skills behind the title?
I knew I wanted to leave my job, but for a while I was looking at other museum or cultural institution jobs. And at a certain point, I just kind of gave up on that and started looking at anything in the area that I could get to on public transit that paid me at the amount of money I decided I wanted to make, to be more comfortable. And I just kind of started throwing resumes out there, anything that looked like I had the skills. Full disclosure, I got hired at my alma mater, but networking isn't, bad. So it took, I would say, it took 2 or 3 years to decide I wanted to kind of try and move on to something else. And when I gave up on that being in the museum field, it took maybe 2 months, 3 months. So once I opened myself up to that possibility, I started to see the opportunities in front of me.
I'll also add the caveat that these all happened before COVID.
Yes. Yeah.
I would say the same as Mikaela. It was a little bit of like looking around in the museum world and then slowly being like, all right, you got to look somewhere else. And then when I started looking somewhere else, it was a matter of months or so.
Yeah, same. I was looking for a couple of months. I knew I kind of wanted to shift from that part-time to full-time. But actually the job I'm in right now, when I interviewed, was part-time, and I was like, I'll just do a third, whatever. And the interview went so well that they actually worked a way to make it full-time. So it played in my benefit to use my personality and to relax and just talk about my skills in an interview. So I think the interview was helpful because they were able to look past most of they weren't just focusing on the museum experience. They were looking at what I could bring to the table and seeing that I could be an asset to the team. So I think, sharpening up on your interview skills can make a huge difference. But yeah, it took about probably 3 months to actually switch over.
I will say, having interviewed both Mikaela and Tarra before, they're 2 of the best interviews ever. And if Rebecca is also in the audience for this session, I know she's at the conference, she's the third. A good interview will go a long way with that. And that's amazing that it built a part-time job into a full-time job. I'm not surprised, but.
Oh, thanks. Crazy, but thankful.
My alarm just yelled at me, so we have 2 minutes. I'm gonna get this last question from Carly in. Do you miss anything about the museum field, like having an outlet for your creativity?
I'll just say very quickly that I find that, with all of the learning I'm doing, that sort of supplants some of that. And I just find that, there are ways that I can still be creative in what I do.
I do miss that the changing exhibits. I miss that whole world that's constantly turning and flowing and being, the highs and the lows. I miss the art. I miss the science. I miss those things. I do miss that. But I have, I'll go to an institution, I'll go see things, just kind of keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening in the community. Those little things are very helpful in this transition that I did.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that I definitely do miss the creativity, and and also the people. But that might just be like a lot of the people I work with are my parents' age or older. So coming from a field that had a lot more young people in it, I really miss that. But I also, again, that work-life balance, there's just other ways for me to be creative. I can explore my hobbies more. I can go on trips. I can, all these different things that were kind of like outside of my reach before I left the field. So it's just kind of more of a shift of where I find that outlet. And it's not at work, and that's okay.
I think that I actually have more of an outlet for creativity now, just because the positions I was taking on in the museum world were more of, people telling me what I was going to do, or, not getting to have the say over those things as much. Whereas I think now I have more ownership of my position, and I get to plan the graduations and do all of these things that my boss kind of trusts me to handle, because it's just me in this department. So I think I definitely miss the museum field, and I miss the changing exhibits and the people, but I think I have more creativity now.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank the four of you for being here and doing this today, having this discussion. It gives me great joy to see you all doing so well. This has been very valuable. I'm glad that Seema kind of set it up for us at the end of that keynote. And I think conversations like this are going to be so important in the immediate future of the museum field, with so many folks leaving the field unexpectedly. So thank you so much. I hope everyone continues along with the conference today. There's a lot of great sessions out there.